Hello everyone and welcome to the case study video for the Millennium Drought that took place in Australia between 2001 and 2009. In this video I will be explaining the causes, effects and responses of and to the Millennium Drought in Australia, and then we'll take a look at an exam question and break it down a bit. Hope you enjoy. So according to the exam spec, we need to know of a non-UK based natural weather hazard, and we have chosen a drought for this one. So Miss Chalkley has spoken to you already on her video about flash flooding in Boscastle. So we're now going to look at particularly the southeast of Australia and the impact of the Millennium Drought there. So firstly, what is a drought then? Well, a drought is a period of time when an area or region experiences below normal precipitation. Across the world, places differ in their average rainfall, and in an area such as Australia, they have suffered significantly between the years of 2001 and 2009, experiencing extremely below average rainfall. So as a result, this was known as a drought. Now, droughts are the second most costly weather event after hurricanes. So they occur across the world, but we're going to be exploring the one that took place in Australia. So since 1860, when reliable records began, Australia has had a major drought somewhere on the continent in 82 out of 150 years. So why is Australia drought prone? Well, firstly, let's think about its location. Australia lies within the Hadley cell, so what it experiences a lot of high pressure. This is from descending cool air consistently falling over Australia, which results in very low precipitation and can lead to drought. Secondly, as we know, Australia suffers the impacts of El Niño when the trade winds are reversed over the Pacific Ocean. Now, when this takes place, the water off the coast of East Australia is much cooler, which means that less air rises. So as a result, they experience even higher pressure. And as we remember, geographers, high pressure means dry conditions and hot weather. Now, where did the Millennium Drought take place? You may want to pause the video at this point and just take a look at the graphic that's on the screen here, a map of Australia. Now, taking a look at this, it's clear to see that some places experienced much less rainfall than others in Australia, and it's important to be clear about this. Now, as we take a look at this diagram, we can clearly see in the southeast of Australia, they've experienced the lowest on record rainfall rates. However, in other places, particularly in the northwest, they've actually experienced the highest on record rainfall. So where we talk about the Millennium Drought, we really need to talk about the southeast of Australia suffering the most. So let's look at the impacts of the Millennium Drought, and I want to take particular focus on the impacts on the rural areas of Australia who took the brunt of the impacts. So 10 years of drought have affected nearly every aspect of Australia's rural economies. Considering only one of the worst years of the drought, the Australian Bureau of Statistics estimated that drought in 2002 to 2003 caused a $7.4 billion drop in agricultural production and a loss of around 70,000 jobs. During the worst years of the drought, from 2001 to 2006, 10,636 families gave up farming. Many other farm families turned to other sources of income, taking jobs off the farm or search for other ways to supplement their income. As well, farm debt has tripled over the past 10 years, to the point where the average farmer owes $400,000. The drought has also discouraged a generation of young would-be farmers. Today, only 29% of farm families expect their children to take over the farm. A potential consequence of all these farm closures is to further depopulate already sparsely settled areas, making it more difficult for the government to maintain public services. So let's think more about the impacts on farming. You might want to pause the video at this point and take a look at the graphic on the board. So Australia's cotton production before the drought reached a high of 795,000 tonnes in 2000 to 2001. It was valued at $1.8 billion. However, by 2007 to 2008, production fell to just 133,000 tonnes, worth now only $254 million. Let's think as well about the wine. So Australia's prominence as a global wine producer is also threatened by this drought. In recent years, Australia has become a major wine exporter, with exports valued at $3 billion per year. The country has become the #1 supplier of imported wine in England and lags only France and Italy in supplying the US's import market. All of Australia's grape growers rely on irrigation, and as water has become more expensive, the profits they had been making have actually decreased. At this point, I want us to look closely at the Murray-Darling River Basin, the area of land in the southeast of Australia which took the real hit of the drought. Now, the Murray River Basin in southeast Australia covers 1 million square kilometres, which is 14% of Australia's area. And that's a size equivalent to France and Spain combined. It is home to 39% of the nation's agricultural production and 85% of the irrigated area. Now, if you remember at this point, irrigation is when water is supplied to agricultural activities. Now, because of this drought, due to agriculture being so heavy in the area and this lack of rainfall, the Murray River failed to flow to the sea in 2002. For decades prior to this, the poor health of the river and the growing environmental movement led to calls to restore the river through better water management. Now, because of this lack of water, the eucalyptus trees in the areas decline. Now, an animal which is very close to an Australian's heart is a koala bear, and koala bears rely on eucalyptus trees. So actually the koala bear population decreased as well. Now, as all good geographers do, we need to evaluate this and consider, well, was it really that bad though? Did this actually open Australians' eyes to opportunity? In recent years, agriculture has contributed to only 3% of the nation's economy. Yet, agriculture takes up 54% of Australia's land and 65% of its human water use. In his best-selling book, Collapse, Jared Diamond states that only tiny areas of Australian land currently being used for agriculture are productive and suitable for sustained agricultural operations. Now, behind this statement is the fact that 80% of agricultural profits, so this is all the money made from agriculture, 80% of it only comes from 0.8% of the country's agricultural lands. This means that a lot of the farms are very unprofitable. Let's think about this from the other side then. Most of the citizens in Australia live near the coast. Much of the food they eat and products they buy are imported from overseas. This means that they are insulated, or shall we say they don't notice the effects of the drought. Looking at the pie chart at this point, you can see just how much of the population actually work in tertiary, quaternary and even quinary sectors of the economy, showing what an urban-based population Australia is. So maybe this drought actually is an opportunity to rebalance the books, because farming here clearly shows it's not economically productive, yet is using up a lot of water and using up a lot of land. So what this means is that Australia's farmers are even more vulnerable. Agriculture, which was once the country's dominant industry, so most people used to work in it, now makes up only 2.5% of the economy, but it uses 2/3 of the water supply. So we thought about the impacts of the drought. Let's consider how Australians have been responding to it and how effective this has been. Now, what I think has been a really effective way to deal with this drought, and has actually been a positive, is that farmers have changed their techniques to ensure that they can still grow crops, but without as much water. So many more farmers are now using water-saving management practices, such as no-till planting and improved irrigation methods. So zero-till has been described as a revolution in wheat farming in Australia in the past decade. Using zero-till methods, farmers plant directly into undisturbed soil, leaving stubble from the previous crop in place. This method conserves soil moisture and organic matter, allowing farmers to achieve small but economic harvests with as little as 100 millimetres of rain. Mick Keogh, who's Executive Director of the Australian Farm Institute, says that the cropping technologies, such as zero-till, have had a huge impact. In terms of labour and time, the technology is light years from where it was 20 or 30 years ago, and with that comes flexibility. Politically, Australia's government responded by committing $12.6 billion over the next 10 years to ensure that irrigation has become more efficient for farms, such as installing drip irrigation. Drought has encouraged more cities to consider desalination as a new source of water supply. Desalination plants effectively turn seawater, which is salty, into pure drinking water. In 2006, the city of Perth opened up the Kwinana Desalination Plant, the first seawater desalination plant for urban water supply in Australia. A second plant is already under construction in Perth, and a number of other plants are either being planned or already under construction in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and on the Gold Coast. Together, the country's 5 largest cities are spending $13.2 billion and installing sufficient capacity to meet 30% of their current water needs. As of 2009, there were a total of 46 desalination plants in Australia with a capacity of at least 10,000 litres per day. And by the year 2013, the total capacity was expected to double. The government has already dedicated $20 million over 5 years to create a desalination research centre in Perth and a centre for research on water recycling in Brisbane. Now, to finance construction, suppliers have been forced to raise water rates, so passing on the expense to customers. Others oppose desalination for its environmental impact. Desalination can release back extra salty water into the sea, and hydrochloric acid and chlorine, which is particularly affecting the phytoplankton, which are at the bottom of the food chain and have a significant impact if affected. Up to half the cost of operating a desalination plant is for the purchase of electricity. And because most of Australia's electricity is produced from coal, desalination contributes to the emission of greenhouse gases. So desalination plants are very energy intensive. So Australian cities' demand management efforts have actually been really successful in reducing demand for water. So between 2002 and 2008, per capita urban water use declined by 37%. To date, permanent restrictions have been put in place in cities in Victoria, South Australia, and the ACT. So these are all states in Australia. The most typical permanent restriction is on daytime sprinkler use, which utilities estimate has resulted in savings of 4 to 9%. However, some have said that the restrictions on outdoor water use have made it harder to keep recreational areas green and attractive. According to one report, this has resulted in a loss of participation in sports and associated impact on community health, community pride and spirit, and actually a rise in antisocial behaviour and a loss of employment. So, the question I've chosen for you guys to have a go at is, for one heat wave or drought that you have studied, evaluate the responses to the natural weather hazard. Now, the key thing is about structure here. As it is a 6-mark question, this will be marked at a level 3. Now, it's important for the structure that you've got 2 PED paragraphs, as you've been asked to evaluate the responses. So this means you need to give 2 responses, but ensure that you are writing about how effective that response was. So that includes evidence, but that also importantly includes evaluation. So how successful was each response? I've had a go at this question now. This is a paragraph I've written that reflects the structure that we're looking for of point, evidence, explain, and development. The key thing is to look at that evaluation that I've done. Have a go at this question, answer it, hand it into your geography teacher and get that feedback. I've really enjoyed doing this video. I hope you've enjoyed it too and found it useful. And thanks for your time. Bye-bye.